Today's budget confirms UK recovery. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, is now forecasting 2.5% growth this year and 2.3% in 2016. Northern Ireland's recovery continues and unemployment continues to fall, albeit with indications of some slowdown. PwC forecast growth of 1.7% this year, down on 1.8% last year. Today's budget comes in the midst of questions as to a more fundamental improvement in the Northern Ireland economy. How might, for example, a substantial living standards gap relative to the UK average be narrowed, given that over the last 7 years it has in fact widened? The UK budget also coincides with considerable and continuing uncertainty relating to the Executive's own budget, welfare reform, and in fact the entire Stormont House timetable of process of reform and modernisation. Expanding UK tax revenues gave the Chancellor some room for manoeuvre to cut taxes and spend more. The latter translates into a positive Barnett consequential for the Northern Ireland Executive of £11 million. That's rather less than might have been expected, but overall the consistently low allocation across the three devolved administrations suggests that the budget is generally fiscally neutral. Taking a longer-term view, over the next Parliament, the Chancellor indicates some easing of austerity. However, there could still be a substantial real terms cut in Whitehall Department's current spending of maybe up to 16% in real terms during 2015-18, with an associated read across to Northern Ireland. The available indications are, in fact, that a Labour government would continue with the bulk of such austerity, and an austerity lag means that Northern Ireland may still face some stiff spending restraint in the next few years. Hence, the Northern Ireland Executive should be planning now for 4 tight budgets ahead. The assumption should not be made that the general election will unlock substantial extra monies for Northern Ireland. In fact, a Labour government dependent on Scottish nationalist support might enact measures such as lower corporation tax or air passenger duty in Scotland, which would represent considerable tax competition for Northern Ireland. Some specific budget 2015 measures of particular relevance to Northern Ireland include the allowance for income tax rising to £10,800 and then in the following year £11,000, the freezing of fuel duty and a 20p increase in the minimum wage to £6.70.
Today the Chancellor delivered the final budget of this Parliament, with many of the main measures having been trailed in the press over the last few days. Consequently, commentators were not expecting the budget speech to deliver any major surprises or tax giveaways. And the commentators got what they were expecting: no surprises and no giveaways in what transpired to be a budget that is broadly fiscally neutral over the next 4 years. Continuing the theme of previous budgets and reflecting recent political statements made in the media, there was a heavy emphasis on anti-avoidance, particularly directed towards larger businesses. Banks were also in the firing line again, with an increase in the bank levy, restrictions on the offset of losses, an announcement first made in the autumn statement, and the banning of tax deductions for compensation payments made to customers. Over the next 5 years, those measures are expected to raise approximately £8 billion. The other big money earner is pensions, with 2 significant announcements. First, the restriction to £1 million in the maximum pension pot that an individual can build up. This takes effect from April 2016, with that threshold then being indexed from April 2018. Secondly, existing pensioners who currently receive annuities will be given the freedom to sell that entitlement for a lump sum. The 55% penalty rate of tax that this would currently attract will be abolished. Instead, you'll be taxed on the proceeds at your marginal rate of income tax, and this freedom will be available from April 2016. The Chancellor is clearly expecting people to take up this offer, as these 2 measures are expected to raise approximately £2.5 billion over the next 5 years, with a very significant chunk of that being accelerated tax receipts on the lump sums coming from annuity sales. Whilst the continuing reform of pensions and the increased simplicity and flexibility that it brings is welcome, the pensions sector has gone through a long period of unprecedented change, and individual savers and the pensions industry would welcome a period of stability. The money raised through the above measures has broadly been used to fund the increase in the personal allowance, the introduction of the personal savings allowance, which is the new tax exemption on the first £1,000 or £500 of savings income, and the changes to the ISA regime, including the introduction of the Help to Buy ISA. Now, on matters closer to home, the Corporation Tax Northern Ireland Bill successfully passed through the House of Lords yesterday and now waits royal assent. However, even after its enactment, the legislation will still need the incoming post-election government to finally switch it on before the executive can implement what will then become the Corporation Tax Act. Hence the continuing importance of the local assembly sticking to the provisions of the Stormont House Agreement, a point the Chancellor made during his statement. Regarding the detail of the corporation tax regime, the rules it is based on will be relatively straightforward for foreign direct investors to understand. However, for existing businesses in Northern Ireland, there are some complexities and unexpected results. And this explains why HMRC have confirmed that they expect businesses to restructure and reorganise their affairs in advance of the regime commencing. Finally, HMRC is joining the digital age and have promised one of the biggest changes ever in tax compliance. The current requirement for individuals and small businesses to submit an annual tax return is going to be radically overhauled. Starting in early 2016, 15 million individuals and small businesses will be given a digital tax account, and this will extend to all individuals and small businesses by 2020. Revisions to the current timing of tax payments are also going to be made, with a pay-as-you-go system introduced. Further details of what these changes will mean in practice will be published later this year. So, that wraps up the 2015 budget commentary and the budget commentaries for the current coalition government. What the May election and therefore future budgets will bring remains very uncertain.